name is Robert Henneke. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and we're here to have a discussion about the next generation of conservatism. And is the conservative coalition changing? Well, yes, but in what ways are most significant? You know, the American electorate has changed with the millennial generation that born 1981 and 1996 has surpassed the boomer generation, 46 through 64, as the largest voting bloc in the United States. And there's been realignment for some time. You consider the original Republican Party of Lincoln was a working class party dedicated to national greatness. That's certainly changed over time. But joining me for this discussion are four conservative members of the millennial generation. We have with me Representative Carolyn Harris Davila, State Representative, District 52. Ellen Troxclair, State Representative for District 19. Chris Bedford, who is a senior contributor at The Federalist. And Hayden Paget, who is the chair of the Young Republican National Federation. Paget, my sorry. So their bios are online with the materials. I think it's more interesting to hear what they say. Many are familiar to y'all. So, you know, to jump in as kind of a way of your introduction, and this may be the only time I go down the line, but Caroline, starting with you, why are you in the arena? Why do you do what you do? Why are you here representing the conservative movement today?
That's a great question to start off with everything, and actually I was talking with a few people about that earlier today. I honestly had a moment, like I'm sure all of us in the room have had, where you got frustrated and you said, somebody needs to do something, or why isn't somebody doing something about X, Y, or Z? And I had that moment, and actually it was on voter ID. My state rep was part of the group that fled to DC, and he went on the news and said, we need no form of voter ID in Texas, not even what we already have on the books. And that just made me mad. There were other stances he had taken, and I did not expect to be the one stepping up to the plate. I actually went and, approached other people about stepping up to the plate, and it took, my community, my friends, my family, people like Ellen Troxclair to really encourage me and let me know that I could do it. I was only 27 at the time, and I thought there's no way at 27 that I can run for office and be effective. But thankfully, I just had wonderful people around me that encouraged me, no, if you're passionate about this and you really want to make a difference, this is the way to make a difference. And I'm so grateful for those people because I don't think I would be here without them. I worked for Senator Brian Hughes for 8 years, and he was just one of those incredible mentors that gave me the tools so that when I did finally get frustrated and fed up, I knew, okay, I at least know who to talk to, what to do, and I ended up here, and I am so happy to be here. I am loving being a state representative. I love being the face of the new generation as well. And fun fact, I am a millennial, but I'm also like in the gap of millennial and Gen Z. So I also claim Gen Z, but anyways.
I love hearing how everybody gets involved originally. For me, the issue was property taxes, and I was also a Capitol staffer and also had a great mentor in Representative Jason Isaac, who equipped me well to go on and be doing what I'm doing today. But for me, it was my husband and I, newlyweds, pinching our pennies, both working 2 jobs. He was going to night school at San Antonio to get his law degree. I mean, we were doing everything we could to like make ends meet and to start our own American dream. We bought our house with the pennies that we had pinched, and then we got our property tax bill. And at the rate that the city of Austin was taxing us, there was just no way. I mean, we just truly looked at each other and thought, oh my gosh, where have we gone wrong? We are not going to be able to afford to continue to live in this home. And the next day I kind of woke up and same thing. Well, if I'm not going to do something about it, then I guess I can't complain. And I ran as a 29-year-old conservative for the Austin City Council and won. I mean, it's just the story. And to be able then to pass the city's first homestead exemption as one of the few conservative members on the Austin City Council, and now be able to not only have encouraged other people to get involved and to run, but to also have been a part of passing the largest property tax cut in United States history. I mean, it's just so, I'm also a person who never thought that I would be doing this. I didn't want to do the public speaking, and I was happy to be behind the scenes, but oh my gosh, what a testament. I try to share my story as much as possible of stepping outside my comfort zone and doing the hard thing, and if you do that, you'll find the support, and you can ultimately make a difference, not just for your own community, but for the whole state.
I'm Chris Bedford. Thanks for having me. I think I'm on the older side of the millennials, and I originally got involved in politics through punk rock, and I found out when most of my friends ended up going to the left, so a couple things started to draw me much further to the right. Going down to see Ground Zero when it was still smoking the day the last wall came down. I'm from Boston, gave me a good idea that there is real evil, not just something you read about in books or you see in Star Wars, but there's real evil in the world, and there are innocent victims of that. Listening to Johnny Cash on the way to school gave me a sense of pride in the American flag and the history and the whole country that exists outside of Massachusetts. And then the last step was going to college and seeing the unvarnished, unhidden views of left-wing professors who their points of view may be common now on the political stage, but at that time the Democratic Party was not espousing a hatred of family, a hatred of Christianity, a hatred of God, a hatred of the country, and I would hear that all the time in my university. So I got a bunch of books by Hayek and Russell Kirk and Bill Buckley and started down a path that's taken me to Young Americans for Freedom and then into writing, and when you're writing, you don't have to you can be as hardline as you want. You don't have to make deals, but like politics is the art of making deals. And you don't have to raise money. And I like to do that a lot better than raising money.
Aiden?
So my journey into conservatism wasn't a particular issue, wasn't as dramatic as actually visiting the place of the two towers after 9/11. It was family. So my grandfather was a pilot in World War II, grew up in rural Alabama, moved to California back when it was not California, and he worked for Lockheed, and so he built defense equipment. And he was a Democrat because he's from the South. And then in Goldwater's election, he got radicalized, that famous saying. And so he actually was in the motorcade driving him from the airport to the convention center in San Francisco. And since then, he just was volunteering and so on. And so when I was growing up, that was just what you did. You just were a Republican volunteer. You just were involved in that. And so it was kind of expected that I was doing this kind of stuff. But the other thing that was important there is growing up in California as it did, and now living in Texas, I didn't have to theorize or ask people about what it was like to live under those policies. I had a ground floor view of it. And people talk about how bad Newsom is, but we don't really understand that because you're not actually there. It is as bad as people say it is. And so the thing that really got me engaged back in 2013, 2012, when I first joined the YRs, was realizing, hey, I don't want to live in a world like this. I don't want to have all these little annoying things in my life, and I can do something about that. I can get involved. I can help elect people to office to fix things, and so I've been doing that ever since.
So in kind of framing some of the defining characteristics, you look at whether it's World War II, Vietnam, 9/11, each generation seems shaped in part by a milestone event. A couple years past what happened during the COVID event. Is that a milestone event? And is COVID pandemic is what happened during those years? Is that going to matter in the next decade, 2 decades? What do y'all think?
I think it's more of a milestone in decline. Both 9/11 and COVID were massive opportunities, the kind of things that can awake a nation to what's actually going on, and both failed to. We missed our moment. World War II reshaped people to an idea of service and unity that lasted for years, and sacrifice. After 9/11, we were told to go shopping. We set up security TSA at the airport. I just went through it earlier today. If you notice, there was not a single sign that said, come serve your country. They said, come get these great benefits. Be a government employee, come work for TSA, and the feeling hasn't changed. With COVID, There's no way in 2019 that I would have believed that the federal government could have shut down our churches, shut down our businesses, ruined people's lives, ruined people's marriages, kept kids out of school, lied to us repeatedly, censored our media, and gotten away with it. I mean, the Americans of the 1960s and 70s, I mean, they used to drop politicians like flies. And nowadays, people were getting their lives ruined. And I was just kind of surprised. I'm happy. It's good to not be violent. But I was shocked to not see any reprisals from people who just lost everything against the people who took it from them. People were kept from their grandparents when they died. People were kept from their wives when they died. And now everyone just wants to move on, and no one wants to talk about it. And the people who did this to us say, well, let's have a national truce. But they're still walking through the corridors of power. And that's something that I'd like to, as a conservative movement, as an American people, come back to and say, people did this to us. The disease didn't do this to us. It was done by leaders and corporations who lied and said we're all in this together. And they've gotten away with it because we're all tired.
And the only thing I want to add to that is I think actually there are, a few bright spots that COVID kind of showed us, right? And one of those is school choice. I mean, I don't know that we would be having as robust of a discussion in Texas about school choice if we didn't have the buy-in from the parents. I mean, I have older siblings that went through the same thing as a lot of the parents did, watching what their kids were seeing, or the lesson plans that their kids were walking through, and they had no idea that their kids were faced with these issues that they thought they would get to talk to them at a much older age, and much less their teachers talking to them when they were 5 about these sensitive topics. And so I think that was just a really bright spot coming out of COVID. And then the other thing I think that Gen Z, the stats are showing us that Gen Z now is looking at having a better work-life balance. And now there are 19-year-olds who are applying for jobs asking about benefits now and retirement now and the stability of companies now. And I think that as conservatives, that is something we can capitalize on. And we can present our conservative message as this is going to lead, capitalism leads to a stable economy, for example. It will help you keep your job. You will have a better work-life family balance because maybe you'll get paid more, because, Republicans, we care about the job market. We care about having a robust economy. And so I think, yes, there are some things that we saw during COVID that were really disheartening, but I also see a lot of bright spots, and I really think that if we kind of identify those as conservatives, we can capitalize on that. And it may not be this next election cycle, but it could be in 2028 or 2032. It may take some time, but I think that opportunity is definitely there.
Well, and following up on what you were talking about historically, why we have moved on, or some have moved on so quickly from COVID without really a reconciliation or a commitment that we would never go through that again, at least on from the federal level. I wonder if in part it's because we have an age of incredibly connected. We're so connected, but technology and other. It's like we have attention spans of a gnat, And so it's like, well, what's next? What's next? And we have a mentality of escapism, and the social media stuff. And so it's like, okay, yeah, that was bad, but like, what's next? And we're being pulled into all these other things. When you were going through World War I or the Depression or whatever, that was all encompassing for your family, for your community. Every single person was focused on the same thing. And while that was true, maybe for the first few weeks of COVID, it's like everybody else was just looking for. We have trained our minds to not look for a solution to the problem, but to just make our mind feel better temporarily.
And just quickly to add to that, in March of 2020, I flew from DC to Chicago to California and then drove cross country. And you're right, the online drug that people had, the way that the attention span is lowered, the way that people had escapism everywhere was real. But the interconnectedness that we were promised by the tech revolution was not. It was shocking how little everyone in every place I drove through, and I went through the country twice during early COVID, knew about what was going on even in the state next to them. Everyone kind of thought that what was going on there was largely going on everywhere. So in DC, everything was shut down. In Chicago, the airport bars were open, but everything in Chicago was closed. In Los Angeles, the beaches were roped off, and everything was shut down. In South Dakota, the governor gave me a hug, and everyone was out. I mean, but everywhere they went, people were acting like technology dulled at people, but it also isolated them in a strange way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I'm going to maybe get the last word on this one, but I'm going to both agree and disagree, spiciness here, with Chris on this. So the first one is I agree that what COVID definitely helped highlight, and I think in many ways COVID was to Gen Z what 9/11 and the Great Recession were to us, in that like it was kind of the defining thing in our adolescence and us growing up. And for Gen Z, what it highlighted was a few things. One, there is a decline in a lot of places in our country, both in the way we're governed, in the way we're financed, in the way we choose our leaders, certainly in the way our schools are. That was a huge one that everyone was seeing. And I think you're right that the tragedy of it would be if we didn't do anything with that. And there certainly are signs that we're not doing as much as we should. We are not throwing out those politicians as the way we would. Like in 2022, I was very disappointed with the number of races across the country. But I also was very pleased with some of the reaction I did see. You know, we would not have a Republican governor in Virginia if it wasn't for COVID and what it showed about schools. We would not have a 20-point victory lead in Florida if it wasn't for what DeSantis did in COVID. We would not be talking about how we're going to grow our majorities in the Texas House this year if it wasn't for COVID and the response that Greg Abbott had, because in 2020, I was on the front lines, and 2018 about like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose the House, we've got to fight it. Those things are encouraging to me because it shows that there are certain areas where people are saying, this is bad, we need to change something. And if we, as conservatives, and particularly those who are engaged at the thought leadership level or in the legislature, give a promising alternative and make that case really clearly, and not just in a really angry yelling about for yelling's sake kind of way, we'll win because people are ready for that. So that for me is the disagreement. I actually took a little more courage from it.
Good. I'm glad not everyone's as pessimistic as me.
Well, does it, anyone answer this though, do you see a correlation? Because in 2017, Pew polled that 57% of millennial voters identified as liberal, but according to the New York Times last year, almost every cohort of voters under 50 has shifted towards the right. So is it COVID, is it age, or is it complete fake news from the gray lady up north? I mean, is there been a change in perception over the past 7 years?
I want to just bring, yes, I think so. And I think it's the media. You know, I think you can look back and, you know, what you saw on TV was kind of fact for a long time. You know, it never would have crossed your mind that they were trying to present it in a skewed way. It was just, oh, they're just reporting the news. And then, you know, of course we saw in 2016 with Trump, he really kind of started calling that out. And then with COVID, I think people also saw even more of a contrast in what the media was saying and what was actually happening. And to your point about how, you know, different states reacted in different ways, you know, the media reported a lot on California, you know, a lot on Florida, but maybe not in between. And so I think really people didn't realize how kind of how radical the left had gotten over a span of like 20 years. And then once everything came out about the media and they started paying attention, I think that was highlighted more and more and more. And now today, I mean, gosh, Fox News and CNN couldn't be farther apart from each other, right? But I think people are actually waking up to the fact, you know what I thought was liberal 20 years ago is considered moderate Republican today. And I'm so grateful for that too, because, you know, I think for a long time you could say, well, you know, I'm a liberal or I'm a Democrat or whatever, and people didn't really think in terms of this extreme or that extreme. And so it was almost this slow creep to me that was happening, and now people are kind of awake to that, like, oh, wait a second. The Democrat Party that used to be blue collar, you know, for everyone, it's not the same anymore, you know, and you see that in, you know, the Hispanic population. Y'all have probably already talked about this all day, but they are realizing, you know what I thought was Democrat is actually not the Democrat Party of today. They're not pro-family. They are not pro, you know, economy. They don't have the values I do. And so, yes, I think, I don't know that necessarily the values have shifted in as much as people are realizing that the parties are now different and they mean different things.
So let me jump to segue on that. Thank you. My next question was, if you look, when George W. won West Virginia, it was the first time West Virginia had been won presidential since 1984. It was only the third time since 1928. And then since then, you've kind of seen this migration of rural voters, blue collar, and now we're looking at Hispanic communities in South Texas and, older black voters. So are these voters being pushed from the Democrat Party because of liberal policies, or pulled to the Republican Party because conservatism is working? What do y'all think?
I'll take first crack at that one. Pushed is very much the answer. Not just because the Democrats are more extreme than they were before, but because they're going against certain policies that are really important to people's lives. I mean, West Virginia's a good example. Why did Bush win that? It's because in 99, 2000, Al Gore started talking about global warming and cutting off coal. Simple as that. That's why he lost West Virginia. If you look at even Bush's time back in the 90s when he was running for governor here, he started winning greater and greater shares of the Hispanic community in Texas because he was focusing on it. He had messages that mattered to their families and their communities, not just like, oh, I'm going to go talk to the Latinos now. It was what is mattering to their lives. And that has only progressed here in Texas. In fact, I think you look at what's happened here in the last 30 years, that's the story of the shift in a microcosm. And that is only going to continue to accelerate as the Democrats continue to forget what those voters actually need and spend too much time focused on what people in universities want to talk about, and that's just going to alienate more and more people.
And the Democrats have done an incredible job of this, better than any Republican outreach, although Republican outreach has been as good as it possibly can be. I mean, you can't be the party of radical black activist grievance and keep Hispanic voters. You can't be a party that says we're going to get rid of police in neighborhoods that don't really affect you in your middle class neighborhood, but really affect poorer neighborhoods, and keep those voters. You're going to lose them. In Washington, D.C., we're starting to freak out because there are shootings outside of the ballpark, but there are shootings of little girls and little kids in bad neighborhoods all the time now, and in a way, the murder rate is higher than Baltimore. You can't do that. And you also can't be the party of Democratic college-educated elites and keep folks who are kind of normal. I mean, on the one side, it's become kind of cool and countercultural to be conservative, since everyone in college and the universities and the federal government and the media tells you you're awful. You go out there like Bill Burr's making fun of liberals. Shane Gillis came to Austin, Texas, and went viral for making fun of everyone in the audience for all their ideas. I mean, you got Dave Chappelle out there. Like, who are the funny liberal comedians? For a long time, conservatives stunk at comedy entertainment because they put their politics first. We're like, I'm going to make a conservative comedy. And it was never funny. And liberals just made jokes. They just made fun of us, and it was usually pretty good. Now that's completely different. You look at the late night TV show, Stephen Colbert, it's not funny, it's just political. But you see these guys, I don't know if they're going to go out and vote for Donald Trump every time, but they are making fun of the liberals, and they're the cool ones because they're making fun of the folks who are in charge. It stinks because we're not in charge, but it's good because we're funny.
Well, so we've now, in terms of Donald Trump, in terms of President Trump in this, so what role does he have in this demographic shift? Is he part of that cause, or is he just capitalizing upon the success of what's happening already?
He's part of it, but I'll let other people talk.
Well, I mean, I think obviously we could talk forever about Donald Trump, and everybody has their opinions, and he can be a double-edged sword, and he needs to stop tweeting or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, he talks to people like a normal person. Yeah. You understand what he's saying. He doesn't talk in political mumbo jumbo that doesn't impact people's daily life. And so he has brought a style of politics back to where you are having and more of a direct conversation. Again, love him or hate the Twitter commentary. It's like he has cracked the code of being more personal, and more direct. And like that resonates. Again, going back to, we're talking about the next generation that has maybe a shorter attention span, all of us, a shorter attention span. And like we're just tired of it. And we're also tired of, I guess this goes back to the previous question too, of having people tell us that they're going to do something and then it never changes. The Democrats have told the black community that they're the ones that are going to help them for decades. And now, they're waking up and thinking, well, where did that help go? And Biden has absolutely pushed people our direction, because now we've lived, some of this generation that is coming up now, they have lived both under Trump and under Biden, and they have seen that the cost of gas, that they can't afford a gallon of milk and a tank of gas under Biden. And so, as we can argue the philosophical and political differences all we want, but when it comes to things that impact people's families, their kids, and their pocketbooks, he's talking about that stuff, and that's what resonates.
I think people sitting home from COVID, turning on the TV and watching him basically throw rhetorical chairs at CNN reporters. People like that. Yeah. You'd go on worldstar.com, which is usually a site for Waffle House fights, and you'd see Trump wrecking Caitlin Collins. And before you knew it, like Tucker Carlson clips were appearing. Watch Tucker wreck this nerd. And people were just cheering for it. They liked it. It's extremely entertaining. And he's also the funniest president I can remember. Ronald Reagan told some good jokes, but Donald Trump is hysterical.
So bring humor back?
Yeah.
Bring humor back.
It drives people nuts.
Well, and the Babylon Bee has certainly picked, I think they're one of the best resources that we have on our side, is like poking fun of the ridiculousness in a way that's really funny and really engaging and so right on. It's like, Joe Rogan, the pop culture, next generation stuff, they're attracted to the...
It's good.
It's good.
The Daily Show was a Death Star for the Bush administration. They made people who were very serious look very stupid on like a nightly basis. And now the right has that.
Yeah.
So, how does MAGA relate to conservatism?
Great question for y'all.
Let's let the writer take first crack.
It's fantastic. I think it outs a lot of, there's a lot of people in D.C. who like to walk around in Ronald Reagan skin suits who have nothing to do with his actual ideas. You see these politicians and governors out there saying, I believe in the party of Ronald Reagan, therefore I think a corporation should force you to take injections. It's like, what are you talking about? This is insane. And Trump has really put a dagger into the heart of that. You have Mitch McConnell retiring right now, and all the newspapers, NPR, Politico, The Hill, were saying he was the last Reaganite. Because he came in during Reagan, he was a bit of a Reagan nerd when he was growing up, but he really came into leadership, 3 years in Republican leadership and then 2 at the head of the party under George W. Bush. And George W. Bush's policies are kind of different from Reagan's policies. We're talking about Wall Street bailouts, we're talking about amnesty for illegal aliens, the big issues of the Iraq War. These are things that McConnell supported, but when he goes out, everyone claims he was the last Reaganite. People like Tommy Tuberville, who are out there fighting the good fight, are getting shivved in the back by these people who say, well, we're the party of Reagan. We don't stand for babies. We stand for more 5-star generals in the Pentagon. And I think Ronald Reagan, we forget, came in as a disruptor. In '76, he ran against a sitting Republican president who then went on to lose to Jimmy Carter. That's a cardinal sin in party politics. Comes back, 8 great years, and then the day that HW was inaugurated, his supporters jokingly called it the day of long knives, because by the dozens and dozens and dozens, they were all fired from the administration. All the Ronald Reagan conservatives replaced with HW people, in charge for 4 years. Then his son comes in, that's 8 years, and for 20 years, we had a Republican Party that stood for outsourcing, that stood for making people wealthier, sure, but kicking the social issues to the back, saying, we're going to send those to the judiciary. We're not going to deal with these social issues, which, by the way, not only are like Christian social issues, but are the essence of a strong society, which is how we find ourselves now with incredible levels of fatherlessness, incredible levels of drug addiction, porn addiction. They've tried to put all these things in the back burner and just talk about taxes and more money to the military, and that's been a real betrayal. And MAGA hasn't really fulfilled everything it's supposed to, for sure. These are humans, they're fallible. It's incredible how many crooks and corrupt people seem to circle around that orbit. I have to deal with them all the time. But it's a reinvigoration and a calling out of the people who did nothing for decades and who sat on the mantle of great men in the past. And I look forward to what it brings with the younger generation, the people like Senator Vance.
And I just want to add a point to that, going back to what Ellen was talking about and the way that he presents policy. You know, as conservatives, we have not always been great at talking about policy. I mean, we talk about less government, lower taxes, and I think, yes, free markets, right. But what does that translate into, And so many conservative ideals fit inside of Make America Great Again. I mean, it was just brilliant. It gave everybody something to hold on to and something that they could talk about. I think a lot of people feel insecure talking about politics, regardless of what party they're in, because they don't feel like they have the lingo and they don't feel like they're going to say the right thing or the right words. And Trump really threw that out the window and gave everybody, just a vernacular to use. He talked to people on a normal, human, everyday level. What is your top concern? Well, I don't have money for groceries. Okay. As conservatives, we want you to make sure that you have a good job, that you can afford to take care of your family. He just brought it down to a human level instead of talking about, whatever large budget Congress was going to pass and, all the pork in it, whatever. He just boiled it all down to everyday issues, and really that tagline, Make America Great Again, everybody can relate to that. And if you ask somebody what that means, you're going to get a different answer every single time. But it's probably going to be a conservative answer. And so I really appreciate that. I think he's just he's made conservatives feel like they're all part of the fold and they can actually talk about the policy now.
And punch back.
Yeah.
Exactly. To tell people, hey, remember that debate in Las Vegas when they called Hillary Clinton a nasty, nasty woman? And everyone's like, oh, civility. She was up there standing for child sacrifice and late-term abortion. And people are saying, oh, no, civility. It's great to see him punch back. And those 4 years seemed like everywhere was fighting. Like he was fighting with the NFL, he was fighting with Major League Baseball, ESPN, he was fighting with the comic books, he was fighting with everyone. But that's because everyone stunk so badly. He was fighting, and they were all attacking him. And it was good. Republicans like to finally see someone just punching back.
So I'm going to split up this next question I had because I want to put focus on each of these. And we've talked about the shift towards the right in the demographics with rural voters, blue collar, established Hispanics, so forth. But we're losing in two important categories. The first demographic that is moving left are college-educated whites. And the big question is why, but kind of the sub-question is it the lesson that the draw of conservatism is that you're feeling the pain of what's happening in government, if you're in a dwindling rural community, or if you're struggling in a blue-collar community, or because you've lost your job, or some of these others, is that the difference, or why are the shifts moving left led primarily by your college-educated whites?
I agree. I do think I think they are a little further removed from paying taxes and the things that kind of lead people into being a conservative. But the other thing I think that public education, K through 12, has actually been declining longer than we all think. And I think that if you're teaching kids K through 12 to reason and to figure out why should I believe that, is what is being presented to me true or not, and to go through that argument in their head, I think when they get to college, it doesn't really matter what professor they have the tools to really figure out, is this true or not? And I don't think that was happening. And so I think that, by and large, most of these kids got to college and just took exactly what their professor was saying as truth. And it didn't even occur to them to think differently or, contrast that with another idea. And so I honestly think it started from the lack of good education in K through 12. And just kind of
critical thinking skills, right?
Yes, yeah, lack of critical thinking skills being taught, and it kind of goes to your example. I think you had a great education because you did critically think about what your professors were telling you, but it sounds like you were one of few, even when you were going through college. So I honestly think that's where it started, was K through 12, not teaching kids to think critically.
I'll actually go a step further than that, because I agree it was that as a problem, but I think another part of it was, this is not to say our parents were bad, but a lot of the parents of the millennial generation trusted public schools to be the end all of education and forgot that, no, you're the parent. You're the one who teaches morality. You're the one who teaches what it means to be an independent person. You're the one who teaches how to own your own life. And so going back to your point, we forgot as a movement how to make sure that those kinds of things, which are not policy, you can't legislate that kind of thing in. We forgot to talk about that more. We forgot to talk about more about why the family is so important, and that allowed us, our peers, to forget that in school and to not know to just question and ask about it. And so that, I think, led to two different problems, which I think you're going to touch on later, the issue we have with suburban women in particular, but I'll hold on that one. But I think a really good example of that actually is California, where if you look at that state, you're like, why is that always so blue? When you actually divide the state in two, there's actually two different states. You have the coast, which is where all the wealthy, highly educated people live, and that's where a big portion of the voter base is, and they're fine. All the consequences of the policies and the taxes and the terrible infrastructure and the terrible schools, all those things don't affect them. And then you go right over the mountains into the central part of the state, and it is the poorest part of the West. Like, the only place that is statistically worse off is South Texas in some places. And the reason that they don't care is because they're not as well educated, they're not in the reins of power, they don't have much money, and they can't really fight back. But that's a great example of where these policies are failing and where we have to focus our attention in order to make sure we shift things around.
And this is the thing that's going to eventually get me in trouble, is that it's good to see so many college-educated white women here, because generally, like, white women have gone crazy in this country. Does anyone remember the Life of Julia ads from 2012 and Barack Obama? There was like a comic that walked you through the life of this woman named Julia from birth, and it was all the different things that Obama would come in and do for you and take care of you. And there's no husband in this story. There's no parents. There's eventually a child she chooses to have. No mention of like any male partner even being involved in this. And it's been referred to now, if you look it up, at like Pepperdine University has a paper about this being a failed political advertisement. But in reality, it was a blueprint for what these folks were trying to do. This idea of liberation, liberate the woman from femininity, liberate the woman from the idea of family. Like, these things are shackles. Children will take you down. And men kind of just followed blindly, because we generally follow you a lot of different places. Like, the reason I'm not drinking at a bar every night and I'm said I'm a home and a good dad is because of my wife. She really civilizes us.
Very true.
And you've got this tech addiction, you've got this pharmaceutical addiction, you've got this self-help, this social media addiction, these eating disorders. So while young men are suffering, our life expectancy is going down, deaths of despair are going up. We're not graduating at the same levels that women are. We're not achieving the same kind of wealth earning that women are. Women, a lot of them have become unmoored from the kind of meaning in family. And you see, if you look at these Black Lives Matter protests and other radical riots throughout the country, the people who are at the front of these mobs screaming at black officers are white women in $120 yoga pants, screaming at them. And suicide rates have gone skyrocketed. Mental illness rates have skyrocketed. Ideas of people who think that they're queer or genderqueer have skyrocketed. And at the same time, they've become like a group of people that just seem so unmoored from where they're going and so angry. It's been very dangerous, and I think the society has a little bit failed them, and a lot of them, these college-educated people who should be starting lives, instead kind of become a shock troops to the radical left. They're extremely useful, and they're literally the only group of people in the entire country that is not changing their politics in the polling. You do the focus groups, young people are kind of going right, blacks going right, Hispanics going right, whites going right, working class going right, men going right, not college-educated white women. This is an unmoving block, and I think that's part of that radicalization of that isolation.
I think we're seeing a combination of things that have been festering, and a culmination of things that have been going on for decades. One, the breakdown of the nuclear family, right? So those people who are graduating from college, they don't have the same kind of support system in their families. An idea that government is replacing churches as a safety net in a community, and that when you look for help and you don't have a mom and a dad, and then you don't have a church, government is the savior, right? We have increasing rates of, comparison and depression and all of these other things. People are looking for happiness, and they've been told, well, if you're a boy and you just do this surgery and now you're a girl, that will make you happy. Or if you can just make a little bit more money, that will make you happy. Or if you, I read this, I saw this C.S. Lewis quote the other day that it said, mankind is just the sad and long history of men looking for happiness in places other than God, and being continually, disappointed. And so it's like the breakdown of the support systems, of the morality, and honestly, I don't know. It used to be that the right and the left were working towards the same goals. We just had different ideas of how to get there. Now, I am increasingly finding myself in policy conversations where we do not agree on the end goal. Like, we fundamentally don't agree not only on the way to get there, but on the end goal. And I think we've just been constantly, the next generation has been constantly fed all of these other things that are going to make them superficially happy. And then when they don't, they're just dependent on the last thing that's always there, which is government, because government will never, never get smaller, never go away. It's just this increasing. So I think it's just a desperation. And
even the Confederacy and the Union had the same God. They both claimed Washington. They both claimed Jefferson. They both had the same language. They both had the same culture, essentially. We don't have that anymore.
Right.
We are not at the level of Civil War violence, but the things that held us together and were able through a lot of pain and decades to slowly bring us back together are gone.
Well, and we don't understand. One more thing that I want to add is that, like, the line between right and wrong has been so deeply blurred that now I just don't even understand. Like, when you say, is it right or wrong for a child to undergo a life-changing surgery when they're 13, even though they can't get tattoos? I hate to keep coming back to that issue, but for me, that is like the issue that you look at and you're like, how did we get here? And the idea that we do not share these same basic ideas of right and wrong, and we are continually making it, they've been tricked into thinking not only that right might be wrong and vice versa, but if they don't do that, they're bad and they're shamed. Like, we have this whole culture of shame now too, right? That if you don't stand up for this particular segment of our society, then you're not a good person, and you're not. So they're also introducing this new level of shame that is coming out, and I just think that maybe college-educated women are more susceptible to feeling the pressure of that. I don't know.
I'm going to be spicy again and disagree again with Chris, because while I agree that there are definitely people who have been emboldened to be even more radical and disagree on certain fundamental facts like who the founding fathers are and the fact that founding fathers were actually good. Abraham Lincoln was a good dude. Like, those things, there are certain people who disagree with that. But if somewhere like San Francisco can recall school board members for renaming a Lincoln High School, there's hope for us here that the rest of the country is going to be waking up to that thing and saying, no, we disagree with that. The consensus is those positions are too radical. Those are too far, and those are beyond the pale. So again, courage. I find courage there.
And I'm going to add another piece of the puzzle, I think, is messaging. And we talk about this all the time as Republicans. How do we message better? How do we get our story out there? And I think...
Do we talk about it all the time, or do we need to talk about it more? I think what you're saying is we need to talk about it more.
Yes, absolutely. No, but I have thought for a long time, how wonderful would it be if after every legislative session in Texas, for example, there was a commercial that went out throughout the entire state that said, Texas is led by Republicans, and this is what we've done for you. For college-educated women, we have, brought down your property taxes. If you're in a crisis pregnancy, there's a clinic in Austin, Texas that will give you a caregiver until your child is 3 years old, help you find a job, help you with clothing, diapers, formula. Talking about all of these issues that we can all get on board with. We increase transparency in healthcare. That's an issue that everybody can get on board with. And I think we need to start claiming those things as Republicans, because we did that. We accomplished those things this past session, whatever it may have been in the last session, but we don't have the communications infrastructure yet to do that. And YouTube is, the #1 social media platform that everybody's on right now, and you wouldn't really have thought that. I think when we say social media, we think of Facebook and Instagram and all of that, but it is super easy to put an ad on YouTube. It's very simple, and I've talked to a lot of people around my age and said, hey, if there were an ad telling you what had happened during the last legislative session, talking about some bills and stuff like that, would that interest you? And overwhelmingly they say yes, because they've never seen that information anywhere else. They all kind of know now that the news is really not to be trusted. But I just think, yes, we do need to talk about it more, because we haven't gotten it right yet, And again, I'm really excited that I am as young as I am, because I want to be a part of that. I want to get to a point where we are, we are good at messaging. We're better at messaging than the Democrats. That's where I want to be at some point.
In Caroline, I agree that ad would be great. And, wouldn't it be wonderful if there were 3 awesome female state representatives in this room who could make that happen this year?
We are working on it.
We're working on it. But, you just talked about the Life of Julia ads, for the Obama administration. It's like, well, if that what ended up being more effective, but just the wrong message, why have we not, it's been how many years and we're not picking up on it? We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to go talk to some people who are really good at marketing and figure out how to tell stories that connect with people with the right faces, with the right spokespeople in less than 30 seconds,
Emotional ones, too.
It's like we know that we get to people. We just talked about how Trump gets to people because he talks to them directly. But yet, as a party, and you think of how much money is spent every 2 years in all of these elections, just in our state alone, that's not even nationally, and the resources that we do have at our fingertips and how we could execute it properly if we had some people who were willing to take on this project and run with it. But we've been involved in this, totally overwhelmed with this Republican Civil War going on in our state, and we've got to just lift our heads up and keep pushing forward, because we're all going to go down with the same ship if we cannot figure out a way to tell our story and tell our successes in a unified way. We've got a lot of work still to do in Texas, and I know that this is a group that, when you look at where 30 other states have passed school choice, and Texas is, still, what are we doing? What are we doing? We have a great story to tell here that's just getting off the ground, but we really need to change the way that we are approaching our communications. From the party level, from the individual level, from the caucus letter. Whatever it may be, whatever we're doing with the stale talking points, it's not working.
Is it a structural? So is it a structural problem? The last half century, the Republican Party has been the vehicle for movement conservatives. But in talking about what y'all are saying, looking at the national party and looking at the state party, is the Republican Party, and you look at politics today, you look at politicians that have to define themselves with extra adjectives. You don't run as a Republican anymore. 10 years ago you were a Tea Party Republican, or now you're a conservative Republican. So is the Republican Party and the conservative movement one and the same now?
It's not the same. It's a carjacking. And yet conservatives always have to remember that and keep the gun on the driver, or they will kick you out as soon as they can and drive away as fast as possible. The people in leadership, not your friends. A lot of the congressmen and members, at least at the national level, actually kind of are conservative. At least they come there trying to do some good. The strange thing is, maybe if anyone's looking for a job, it's extremely difficult to find conservative staffers. And when people are staffed by folks who are looking at their next job and they're worried about being a fire breather, the congressman's gotten there. This is his job. He wants to be a fire breather, unless he's looking at a Walmart board or something. But the staff are more worried, and they try to hold back the congressman or the senator all the time. It's extremely rare that you see staff pulling someone to the right. But right now, I mean, the GOP may be still the party of moneyed interests in a lot of ways, even though like the moneyed interests have largely moved on from the GOP. And still may be the party of outsourcing, even though the voters are completely against that. There's a disconnect there between the top donors and the actual base. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party is like the party of ball. I mean, they're child sacrificing at this moment. You're getting kicked out if you're anti-abortion. Elected congressman. I just sat next to one at their breakfast the other day who was a former Democrat who got betrayed by the own DNC just because of that one issue. So the GOP is the only way, but just don't forget, like, they're not your friend. They will get rid of you when they can. You cause trouble. It's really easy and simple to explain taxes and missile defense. It's really difficult to explain the social issues that are rotting in our country and to hold people accountable and to yell at the people, the corporations that give the money. So you have to kind of hold their feet to the fire on that.
And I'm going to mention messaging again, but just in the form of storytelling, because I think one of the differences and why people think of the Republican Party in different camps now is because I hear sometimes, conservative people are like, oh my gosh, these kids are making a decision on, changing their gender and it's irreversible and all of this. And then you might talk to a Republican in another part of the state that says, oh, but that's not happening near me. It's not happening in my area, so it's really not that big of a concern. We can talk about that even with fentanyl overdoses. Now everybody's on board, but in my area, we've had kids in high schools in my district pass away from that, and that, again, you have other Republicans, well, that's just not happening in my area, right? And it's kind of wild to me because we are so connected, we see everything on social media, but we still don't do a good job of telling those stories. Of getting out there and talking about how detrimental it really is for a 12-year-old girl to go through a surgery, turn into their version of a boy, and then suffer the consequences, probably die 30 years earlier than they would have. We just don't do a good job of talking about that to the extent to where you get rid of that, well, it's not happening around me, and that turns into, I want to help get rid of that because no child should go through that. Doesn't matter if that child is next to me, my next door neighbor, or all the way across the state. School choice is the same thing. People say, well, the schools around me are good. I really have great schools in my district, but I know that I want to fight for the kids in Houston or Dallas or those areas where the schools really are horrible.
Austin.
I care about those kids.
Austin.
Right. Right, but I think we need to do better at, presenting the issues in that way. Instead of talking about it like, well, yeah, it just doesn't happen around me. No, we need to present a compelling argument for everybody to get on board.
There's no magic bubble. The left is coming for you. There's no Benedict option.
Well, I as the closest to a representative of the Republican Party here, I'll defend the party a little bit. If only to say, if you look at the actual election results nationally for the last, 10 years longer, they're really, really close. Always narrow, thin margins every single time. And in fact, we haven't won a general election as Republicans in, since 2004? That tells us that we don't have an overwhelmingly persuasive message here. And it also tells us that, one, we are spending too much time focusing on national issues and trying to play the left's game of everything is a national, federal thing, rather than going back to our conservative roots, which is actually government should be at the local level, most local level possible. And that actually our cities and our communities and our families are the ones making most decisions in our lives. And the federal government should actually do very, very little. But we are engaging in the same game of talking about everything at the national level and then holding every single person who runs for office in every single district to the exact same standard. Newsflash, it's not going to work. You're not going to win your majorities. You're not going to persuade people who don't have those same beliefs or don't have the same conditions in their local community as you do in a deep red state to vote for you if you're only talking about the exact same things every time. And so part of what we need to do as conservatives is remember why we're conservatives in the first place, which is that we want government to get out of our way and let our families and our communities run our own lives, and that will actually allow us to stop fighting so much amongst ourselves and focus more on what can we get done as a party on the things that really matter. How do we empower the families? How do we get the schools to be more responsive or give more school choice? How do we give more of our money back to us and get the government out of the way of us trying to start businesses or have jobs or save for a house?
So the states are the front lines. You're totally right. You don't. Everything that's going to get done. The main things that are going to get done are going to be done at the local level and the state level. But Republicans have to move on from this. Just shrink the federal government. The civil rights regime is here to stay. It's not going away in this country. You're not going to repeal it. So government is more involved in our lives in the federal level than ever before, and that is the future. And the left has been using this to go after hospitals, to go after orphanages, to go after school systems, to go after cities, to spread chaos everywhere. And the right gets there and says, government's a gun. Yeah, no kidding. I've been shot at it for the last 4 years of the Biden administration, but then they leave it on the table. But I mean, conservatives have to embrace, and the kind of the way DeSantis has in a way in his state, and Texas is doing as well, even on the federal level, the government, and don't be afraid of using that force to try and push through the things that and fight back against the American left.
Oh, I agree. And we need to use that federal power that we have, which Trump did in his term, to reduce the size. Like, one of the best thing, in my opinion, that he did was have the rule to get rid of 2 regulations for any new one that was created. That meaningfully shrunk the government right there. It can be done, and we've done it.
So I'm going to say, as we're rolling, I want to make sure we end up with time for some question and answers, but I've got kind of 2 lightning round questions for all of y'all to set up the Q&A. The first one, I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts. So, the last 50 years, the biggest conservative policy political fight was repealing Roe versus Wade. What is going to be that for the next half century? Who wants to go first? Chris.
I mean, the aftermath of that, I think, is going to be one of the main things for the American right, because we were completely unprepared for it, and it was extremely embarrassing and have been rolled. I mean, the majority of Americans think that second-term abortions should be illegal, 55%. That number goes up dramatically in the third term. The pro-life movement, I'm pro-life, Catholic, and I've had to come to grips with the fact that a lot of the country doesn't agree with me on the first 12 weeks. And that means there needs to be, on a federal level, kind of a realistic approach, because we're getting steamrolled in Ohio and Virginia and Kentucky that are putting in these just wild laws. Texas has done a great job. But nationally, it's been very difficult. So look at it like a house that's on fire and there's 10 kids inside. And maybe you can't save 10 kids like you'd like to, but you can save 2, 4, 5, 6. Go in there and do that. And you're going to have to try and meet the public where they are and then fight back. And that goes back very much to messaging. I mean, we're losing in a lot of ways, because if you go to the front page, like every week of the New York Times, USA Today, People Magazine, Time Magazine, Teen, Vogue, Esquire, there are stories, horror stories about abortion on the front page of entertainment, on CNN, on The New Yorker. And the right has Fox News, which Roger Ailes' philosophy was don't talk about abortion, it doesn't sell. That's slowly starting to change over there, but there's really nothing to answer it. But there are these stories, and put those people on camera. That woman who was hit by a drunk driver and lost her child, to talk about the callousness. That woman who's struggled her entire life to have a child, and to talk about the callousness of these politicians straight to camera. That doctor who's changed their mind to look straight at the camera and say, this is what it is. That kind of messaging, I think, is going to be necessary. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting our butts kicked.
I am going to just say, I think, honestly, immigration, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I know that, the abortion argument will continue as we see what happens on the national scale and on the state level. But honestly, I don't think immigration is really going to go away in the next 10 years. I think it will be a continuous topic of conversation, because so many people have come to our country that we will see the after effects of that for at least the next 20 years, at least. And so I honestly think that will start to take over even some of these social issues. And we're seeing that in the polling in this next election. People are actually ranking immigration higher than pro-life, pro-choice, the economy, other issues. I think that our country has been so destroyed by illegal immigration that we are just now seeing the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to have to deal with.
Agreed, and it's everywhere now. It's in D.C. now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy that we have to say, women's rights, but in a way that we can define what a woman is. I mean, my bill going into next session, the first bill that I'm going to file is a Women's Bill of Rights, that unfortunately didn't pass last session, but that I'm going to have Riley Gaines support on this time. But how crazy is it that we have to, again, sit here and talk about, well, hey, every time that woman is referred to in state statute, this is what that actually means. As we're seeing a decline of masculinity and femininity, like that's not, I don't think it's going to bring them the happiness that they're hoping. So I hope to be a part of like, hey, it's okay to be a nuclear family, to be a happy mom, work if you want, don't work if you don't want, but like stop the infighting, women's rights matter, and no men are not women.
Short answer that
Fantastic.
yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Totally agree. The decades-long fight that we're going to all engage in next is going to be school choice. Hands down. That's the one that, beyond immigration, will have the greatest impact on the next generation, the generations to come.
Awesome. All right, last question before we go to Q&A. Hayden, I'm going to stay with you. Who is going to be the first non-boomer elected president?
I don't know, but I'm very excited to work with him.
The Dodge.
Republican?
Whichever.
I mean, maybe J.D. Vance. That'd be nice.
Okay.
Interesting. I don't know of a specific person, but I will say, you looked at the debate stage during the Republican primary, we have an awesome bench. We have people that look different, that think different. I mean, men, women, black, white, like, this is what the Democrats say that they're about when it comes to diversity, and yet we're the ones that have the diverse thought leaders of the country. So I'm just super excited to understand the future. I mean, the future for the next 4 years is Trump, but what happens after that? And I think he's going to be a big part of supporting, encouraging, and hopefully setting us up for a resurgence of making the next generation great again, right?
I'm going to put in a shameless plug for an organization that I work with, not for, Run Gen Z. And I just want to leave us on a positive note because we have talked about, all these issues and how we're going to tackle them and the bench and all of that. But what I love about them is they work on state races down to local races. And so you're right. We had a great bench. We are going to have people coming up the ranks. But I love that. I just want to encourage you. We are working on it. We are trying to capture that young generation, whether it's Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whoever it may be, to get them involved in the local level because like you were saying, the local level has the most impact. And hopefully when they learn that at the local level, they'll take it to Congress or they'll take it to the presidency. But on a practical note, I do think Vivek might be I don't know. He might be the first. I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you. That's been a great discussion. I want to get as much questions as we can, so really short questions so our panel can address. And I saw your hand up first.
Wonderful panel. Really glad that TPPF did this. You guys set me up really well because messaging is such a huge part of how we win, especially the next generation of voters. TPPF does it right. There's been panels on issues that we're good at, but we don't talk about. There's a panel on housing affordability, that's tomorrow, on healthcare. And one of those issues that we know is important to the next generation of voters that has been painted in a very different light by the other side is, I think, the environment. I say the environment for a reason, not climate change or this really outlandish, anti-human, anti-energy idea that's been sold by the other side. I would love to hear from any of you on the stage how do we win on that? Like, how important do you think it is for the next generation of voters, whether it's on a local, state, or even federal level? Thank you.
Well, a lot of y'all have probably heard of Scott Pressler, who works with the Republicans. Well, I didn't realize this, but I learned this the other day that his first political engagement was picking up trash. Like, he set up events to pick up trash from highways and to clean up. And his message was, I care about the environment. I'm going to start that. And then he got involved in politics from there. But I think, again, yes, it's part of messaging. We don't talk about the impact that oil and gas has had on us for the past, 20, 30 years, but every day, it powers our entire lives. And there are some good commercials I've seen, actually, about the impact of oil and gas lately. But I think it is just presenting it in a positive light and talking about, I mean, the U.S. does a great job when you compare us to the rest of the world. We really do. I mean, yes, we can always do a better job, but we don't tell that message either. You know, we don't talk about how we have come a long way when you look at the world as a whole and who actually cares about the environment and, you know, what we're doing.
Next.
I'll just pipe in
Yeah.
real quick and say, you know, I represent a super red district in the Texas Hill Country, Western Travis County, Burnett, Blanco, Gillespie, and Kendall, and I am absolutely convinced that conservatives were the original conservationists. Like, these are the farmers and the ranchers
we literally were.
that are growing our food, that are, you know, and they're the ones that care about what happens to our water, what happens to and their ability to continue to produce food for the nation. So, like, I think we could do a better job of highlighting their stories as well.
But also be bold and call them out as anti-human. I mean, these guys couldn't solve the common cold, and they say that they can harness the powers of the environment if they just drive a Prius. It's completely insane. It's anti-human. And talk about how great our energy production is, how it stands for the American worker, how it powers the greatest economy in the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Bailey O'Donnell. I go to Texas Wesleyan University. I just want to say thank you. It's really refreshing to see younger people talking about politics. I'm just used to old white men. But something that's been, no offense, I'm sorry. Something that I've run into a problem as a Christian conservative is the phrase Christian nationalism. How do I approach that by saying, yes, I think our nation was founded on Christian principles, without being like, yeah, I'm a Christian nationalist and I want to make sure you have no other religion? How would I go about addressing that in a kind way, or should we even be acknowledging that Christian nationalism is happening?
I honestly think one of the best things that you can do is ask questions. You know, if somebody says, oh, well, you're a Christian nationalism, well, what does that even mean? And you can say that in a very respectful, you know, calm way. You know, well, tell me more about that. What is that? You know, because yes, I'm a Christian, but I don't know what you're talking about with nationalism, you know, and just put the burden on them to explain what they really mean, because a lot of people throw that around, but they don't really have an idea of what that actually means. So I would start just with asking them, you know, just explain it more, you know.
And another time you could be bold. I mean, I think it started as a slur. Like, we're going to combine these two scary words, but both of them are actually really good things. I mean, standing up for your country and your nation as opposed to being citizens of the world is a good thing. Being a Christian is what built the freest society that allows other religions to flourish in this country. There's been this idea that the separation of church and state means that our state religion is atheism and a rejection of Christianity and God from the public sphere and a rejection of morality, and fight back against that. You got people in D.C. like Russ Vought and others who are saying, no, I'm fine, I'll embrace it. You want to call me someone who's a nationalist and a Christian? I am. And I think that Christianity should inform our governance in our society, and without it, we collapse.
Okay. Hi. Howdy. I'm Councilwoman Michelle Gamboa from Longview, Texas, and I would like to agree with Carolyn Harris-Davila, State Representative, in regards to that immigration is the biggest issue. And what I mean by that is that I'm actually an immigrant. Most people wouldn't be able to tell because I have no accent. I'm a self-proclaimed Mexican hillbilly because I'm from East Texas. But in my humble opinion, I think we both left and right do a terrible job at kicking the can down the road. It's a sexy topic to have inflammatory talking points and get people elected, but what are we actually going to do? Because for me as an immigrant, I'm a proud Texan, I'm a proud American first, I'm a proud all those things, but whenever I worked on Hispanic engagement, try to get other people involved, it's hard to sell it to Latinos, even though that's what we agree with the majority of time, because we're always seen as the devil or as the bad person, but we need to stop looking at it as not all immigration is bad. Illegal immigration is bad, but immigration is good. And as a roofing company, like I have a roofing company in my hometown, I'm struggling to find work. Why? Because not everybody wants to be a roofer. And guess what? And I know we need to offer those jobs to Americans, which we do, but they don't want them. So what are we going to do to actually bring in blue-collared, white-collar, whatever it is, more workforce into America in a streamlined process? Because right now, neither side is coming up with a solution. It's just a sexy topic to rally the bases. And as a fellow immigrant, I would like to see something being done. I'm actively trying to make something to be done. But Mexicans and Latinos, we can't be the scapegoat anymore, or Germans or whatever. Immigration, something needs to happen about it, and we need to do a better job. Thank you.
Guys, any thoughts?
I honestly, I hope that we have more room to talk about that maybe in 2, 3, 4 years. But right now, it is at such a crisis level of other issues that are trumping that one right now because of the intensity of the illegal immigration we're seeing. I mean, in the news we see all these people being killed. A 21-year-old woman goes out for a run and her life is over. That is a huge issue, and we need to solve that. Fentanyl overdoses, the incoming crime. I mean, the left has now made it such a massive problem that we have no choice but to fix that part of it before we start to work on actually, how do you immigrate to our country, whether you want to work, whether you're going to school, what that looks like. And I feel for people, I have friends who are trying to become citizens of America because they love this country and they want to work here and they want to stay here. And it is taking them 10 years to get to the point where they can become a citizen, and we've got people flooding over our borders. So I hope that we can get there, but I think today there's just so many other problems that have come from having an open border that we've got to tackle first before we get to that part of the reform.
I think a lot of those issues, though, are coming because there is no structure for it. And I feel that if there were a structure, then that would prevent a lot of that flooding. But it's a lot of desperate people, and I don't agree with them coming that way, right? My mom's still a permanent resident. We did it the right way. But when, my dad moved to America first, I lived without a father for 5 years until we got the right to come over here, which is fine. I'm happy, and I preach it all year long because people should follow the rule of law. But we are going to continue to have the floodgates open if we don't fix the root issue, which is making immigration a process, and a process that's a streamlined process where people can and actually will make a difference. I agree with what you're saying, but people are dying and things are happening because right now it's an open floodgate, it's a free invite for all, and there's no real good process to get it done.
We
And let me-
hope
let
and
me
pray that the next
go ahead.
president of the United States will have the political capital to take this issue seriously. I mean, it's a federal issue. We're in a canoe, and he's shooting holes in a sinking boat, and Texas is doing everything we can to try to plug them up. But I mean, ultimately, we need leadership at the federal level if we're going to fix the problem.
And let me connect y'all after this to keep that going, but I want to get a couple more questions there. So, yes, sir, in the yellow tie.
If I can do this loud enough. I have not heard one mention of foreign policy in this entire conversation, and I'm curious, since the subject is the next generation, where do you see the next generation of conservative foreign policy? Where is it going?
I think be humble. Walking softly and carrying a big stick is what I hear and see more and more of. Very different from, for example, the outgoing Republican leaders wants to make his legacy funding for Ukraine, something that a meat grinder that the American dollar is not going to be able to do anything other than prolong. We lost in Iraq. We lost in Afghanistan. Deterrence across the world, American deterrence is basically dead. I mean, Houthis are firing rockets at passing ships that they don't care at all. And I think that the United States is giving a lot of late republic vibes off. And the first war you actually end up losing usually ends up in a real way, ends up surprising you. I think the United States needs to recognize the limits to the power it has and also choose a just foreign policy that serves our interests. So much of the State Department serves the interests of the countries that they're supposed to be representing the United States too. I know that Nigeria may need this, I know that England may need this, but why does America need to give it to them? And why does it serve our just interests?
So real quick, I'm going to get 2 questions before we close. So with the blue tie.
Hi, my name is Michael Hewitt from Dallas. My question is, so with the younger generations leaning pretty far to the left, but things being so bad in the country the way they are right now, I do agree younger people are waking up and starting to look at conservatives and at conservative positions. If you had to pick one position looking ahead, one issue looking ahead to the November election to try to talk to these younger generations about, to wake them up to conservative ideals and to conservatism, what would that one issue be?
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Yeah, that's it.
I'm serious, that's it.
Chris.
That sounds right.
Ellen?
Yeah, I was going to say the economy, but in a non-boring way. Yeah.
Kat, let me get your question.
Quick question for the audience. How many people in here are under the age of 45? Raise your hand. Yes! How many people of you in here are over the age of 45? Raise your hand. My question to you is, TPPF, this needs to be a main stage conversation because we need to have older people and donors hearing these responses and seeing this level of engagement, so that's my request to you.
With these amazing panelists. Help me in thanking Carolyn, Ellen, Chris, and Hayden for their commentary today. They'll stick around to ask questions afterwards. Thank you all.